Well, welcome everybody to another edition and segment of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck. And of course, that means some Smart Talk Radio once again is in your future. In this segment, no exception. Very pleased to have with us a former KU grad and from the Kansas City general area, Kate Morrand. Who is Kate Morrand? She's an underwater archaeologist with the Naval History and Heritage Command. It is an interesting, fascinating organization that you, as a Lewis at Large listener, I would guess know little, if anything, about. And excited to have her here. Kate, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, let's do this. Let's give our Northeast Kansas listeners here a little bit about your background and what took you to the United States Naval History and Heritage Command.
Absolutely. Well, it's a long story. I'm originally from Kansas City. Most of my family is from Kansas, and my parents, Mike and Julie, live in Overland Park. I did attend KU, and initially went to the fine art program. Started out as a graphic design student. Loved the program. The professors were excellent. Ended up also taking an introductory art history course, and really loved that. And that kind of shaped how I finished out my undergraduate career as both an art history and fine art major. And so ended up studying abroad through the KU Study Abroad program. And after graduating, I lived abroad for a few years, did my post-baccalaureate work in Florence in conservation, and returned to the U.S. after finishing that. Moved to Washington, D.C., hoping to find a job, and started out interning with the Naval History and Heritage Command, and thankfully started as an intern and then as a contractor, and now I'm a full-time federal employee. So kind of a long and detailed journey, but...
Yeah, fascinating. I'm sure when you were sitting in the dorms up on Daisy Hill, you were not thinking, hey, one of these days I'm going to be involved in the United States Navy. But
yeah.
The whole concept of military history is one that I mean, it's military history in the United States is well documented. But specifically, what is sort of is the charge or the mission of the Naval History and Heritage Command?
The Naval History and Heritage Command is, as NHHC, I'll probably abbreviate it a couple times. It's a component of the U.S. Navy that's responsible for the preservation, research, dissemination of U.S. Navy history. It is comprised of multiple branches, each specializing in a different area of history, from historical artifacts to art to archival documents. Also included are 10 museums around the country, including the National Museum of the U.S. Navy, which is on the Washington Navy Yard, along with the NHHC headquarters. And also includes historic ships, USS Constitution, and historic ship Nautilus. So you can imagine, with all these really incredible and unique historical resources, the mission itself is really to preserve, document, collect, research all of these materials, these cultural materials that really capture the Navy's history.
Right, that makes sense to me. I've got a question. Maybe this is obvious, but do all the other branches of the service have a similar organization or group that are doing the same thing?
Most of the other military branches do have a cultural component. We are one of the unique components that has an underwater archaeology branch, mostly because a lot of our resources are submerged, whereas some of the other military organizations don't necessarily have that need. But most of the other military branches do have a cultural management team.
Right.
So yes.
I'm curious as to, there's a fine line, and again, as an underwater archaeologist, yours feels relatively specific, but in general, the Naval History and Heritage Command, is its mission equally to go out and find and preserve and display important naval artifacts in history, such as whether it's boats or equipment or other discoveries, documents, etc., or is it just to, in essence, tell the story and the history of the Navy?
It incorporates both of those components. In fact, the mission of the Underwater Archaeology branch that I work for is the branch itself is a component of the command, and among our many functions, one of the major functions is cultural resource management. So, on behalf of the Navy, our branch is responsible for managing over 3,000 shipwrecks and 14,000 aircraft wrecks worldwide. So, quite a few sites, and most of these sites are in foreign waters. And so, we do maintain a database of all of these sites and pretty detailed database, but from time to time, yes, those vessels that are of great historical importance, we do have undertake investigations and projects for purposes of, for example, proactive projects for purposes of identification, for example, but then also interpreting that history as well.
If you just joined us, yours truly, Warner Lewis with the Flight Deck of Lewis at Large Radio. This segment talking to a fellow Kansan, Kate Morrand. She is now an underwater archaeologist with the Naval History and Heritage Command, doing important archival work there for sure. Kate, is your time spent, so to speak, back in the lab, in the office, or are you out in the water going down or going wherever you need to go to find various artifacts, particularly if you're on a sort of a search mission to find these things?
That's a good question. Our archaeologists are often in the field, participating in multiple investigations, often collaborating with other federal and state agencies. For example, some of the projects we've done in the last few years include an investigation of a War of 1812 vessel in the Patuxent River, Maryland, which we believe was part of the Chesapeake Flotilla, charged with protecting Washington during the War of 1812. We've done other projects such as recovery investigation of H.L. Hunley, which is a Civil War-era Confederate submarine, remote sensing surveys of World War II remains off the coast of Normandy, some of the D-Day remains, and most recently, too, a survey of World War II vessel USS Houston, which was sunk off the coast of Indonesia. So our projects take us around the world, really, and so the archaeologists do travel quite extensively. When it comes to recovery of material, most of that stabilization and conservation treatment occurs at NHHC HQ in our conservation laboratory, in the Archaeology and Conservation Laboratory, yes. So we kind of split our time between field work and laboratory work, for sure.
So it's sort of a chicken and the egg thing here, Kate. How do you know not what to do, but, for example, I would think from time to time, because of through naval operations or even private citizens come across an object or a piece of a ship or part of a torpedo. I know you've done some torpedo restoration or other pieces of something that was connected either with the Navy or certainly with something going on in the ocean. So that's something you sort of can't predict. You all get a call or an item comes in. So how do you know, how do you prioritize? And then do you also have sort of proactive projects where you go, we know that there's a particular project in this area of the ocean we want to go explore? How do you prioritize things?
That's a good question. And as far as conservation goes, in terms of priorities in what we preserve, we tend to preserve those artifacts that are in most immediate need of treatment. You mentioned sometimes we receive artifacts that have been recovered without permission from a site, which does happen from time to time. Folks, private folks, are pick them up and not having a background in archaeology or in conservation, they're not aware of what's necessary to mitigate the deterioration of these materials. And so oftentimes people return these artifacts to us, hoping that we can help them out, and we're really excited to do that. And we have received artifacts in the past, as I mentioned, from these sort of unauthorized recoveries that unfortunately have sustained quite a bit of damage. So we do have issues with that as well. the artifacts that do come to us through scientific recovery. So in other words, projects that we oversee or permit that come to us and are in our custody from start to finish also need treatment as well. So we tend to prioritize based on the immediate and long-term needs of the collection. And then as far as projects go, there are projects that we initiate and plan, and a lot of times they coincide with the research and projects that some of the other branches of the command are doing as well. So to help not only the archaeologists answer research questions, but the command at large better understand perhaps a historical event or learn more about a particular aspect of Navy history.
Kate, undoubtedly, from time to time, some of the work that you do in and of itself may involve national security, or some of the things you're working on at what point were classified. Is a fair amount of your time spent on work that in one way, shape, or form touches that world of classified material?
Well, the actual shipwrecks themselves, which are designated as sunken military craft, so shipwrecks, aircraft wrecks, submarines, etc., that we are responsible for managing, as I mentioned, sank in multiple different places all around the world. These wrecks themselves may actually often contain classified material, state secrets. Many of them went down during active engagements, so there's also the issue of human remains, and many do serve as war graves. There is also the possibility that they contain active ordnance, live ordnance. Some of the more recent vessels, potentially radioactive material. So that's one of the reasons, too, that the Sunken Military Craft Act, which has been developed to protect and preserve these sites, not only for their historical value, but for all of the components that I just mentioned. So that's one of the reasons that we protect the sites and control access to them for not only purposes of preserving the history, but also for safety reasons as well.
Right. I'm curious as to I got a couple quick questions. One is, let's take, for example, Pearl Harbor. Well documented, obviously. I mean, it's as highly publicized as any of them. For example, are there still things that an organization like yours, the Naval History and Heritage Command, can they learn from going down and exploring even more, or has that been as tapped as it can be?
There's always something that we can learn, in our opinion, from underwater sites. The mere fact that the underwater environment provides often excellent parameters for preservation is kind of makes it a really wonderful resource for tapping into history and learning more from a particular maybe historical event or from the vessel itself. I mean, underwater, if you think about it, you have less light, you have cooler temperatures, you have potentially a more stable pH, you have less human traffic, sometimes less oxygen, or a completely anaerobic environment, all of which contribute to preservation. And because of that, the materials that you find, the condition of the site can help answer a lot of research questions. So we think there is very much to be learned from any site, really.
Again, we're with Kate Morrand. She's an underwater archaeologist with the Naval History and Heritage Command. Did her undergraduate work at the University of Kansas, is from the Kansas City area, so she knows the area well. Probably not too much happening in your line of work in this area, but that being said, kind of going back to the idea that the studying whether they're sunken military craft or sunken military anything, do you find yourself, are there certain times where you have to quickly, so to speak, get to a site, whether it's been around for a long time or not, because potential enemies doing the exact same thing?
Every once in a while, we do have more, for lack of a better word, sometimes emergency projects.
Right.
That occur when we may have unauthorized disturbance of a site. If the site is in immediate danger of disturbance or destruction, sometimes we do encounter those issues. And then we also sometimes do receive more sort of last minute as well conservation projects. For example, earlier you mentioned the Hell torpedo, and that was a really interesting piece that was recovered off the coast of San Diego last year, and actually a really interesting story found by Navy dolphins that were part of the marine mammal program out in San Diego, and that was sort of a kind of a very last minute, kind of very quick phone call. Here it is. What do we do with it? And we're able to bring this torpedo in, which is over 9 feet long, thankfully inert. But in one day, we got, within a matter of a couple days, we got a very large and complex artifact that was in need of conservation. So these cases do arise, and thankfully we're able to. We're a small team, but we're able to manage most of it that comes our way.
Kate, again, we've been talking about the preservation work you do and what you oversee. Give our Lewis at Large listeners an example of some of the things that are now being preserved and that you oversee. What's part of your collection? It must be fascinating what you work with.
We've got a really wonderful collection. Here at NHHC HQ, we've got over 2,500 artifacts, many in active conservation treatment. The collection itself comprises archaeological material that spans from kind of the late 18th century, so the earliest beginnings of the Navy, to about World War II, the largest portion of our collection being artifacts from Civil War era, so vessels like USS Westfield, USS Housatonic, CSS Alabama, H.L. Hunley, which was a Confederate submarine. So really interesting collection as a whole. And then we've got an additional 11,000 artifacts that are on loan to various museums and other institutions around the country and abroad as well. Some of the active projects that we're working on, as I mentioned, the War of 1812 site, we have quite a bit of material that's come from those investigations, which includes surgical instruments, parts of the vessel itself, all 200 years old and in actually very excellent condition. We have some artifacts that have come to us from more recent vessels as well. USS Emmons, for example, which was a World War II vessel. We have the builder's plaque from that site, which we're actively treating. There's a trumpet that has been returned to us recently from USS Houston that is undergoing active treatment. And then also, as I mentioned, the Hell torpedo is also another one of our big projects. So that's undergoing active treatment as well.
Let's focus on a trumpet that was returned from the USS Houston. Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. The trumpet came to us at the end of 2013, and it was one of those artifacts that had been removed from the site without permission by a private citizen who really wasn't aware of the potential damage that could have been done to the trumpet, and really that the site itself was still U.S. government property.
Is the case? Sorry to interrupt you. Is this someone that's scuba diving on their own and they come across it, or how's this happen?
This was a private citizen, and I believe he was a sport diver. And I should reiterate that that diving is not prohibited at all on these military craft. It's non-destructive. It's not disturbing the site. So most divers that do dive on the sites are really one of our main advocates in monitoring the sites. Just very, very every once in a while you do get people who do remove things from the sites, and unfortunately this was one case where that occurred. And so the trumpet was removed, unfortunately allowed to dry out without undertaking any conservation treatment to mitigate any of those really components that contribute to its deterioration. So unfortunately it was allowed to dry out, and the person who removed it was able to visually see that there was active corrosion occurring on the trumpet, and decided to return it actually to the Navy. So he reached out to Navy and was able to get it back to us. And so it's in active treatment at the moment, and could potentially be a very important artifact. The story is that when Houston was sinking off the coast of Indonesia following the Battle of Sunda Strait, the captain called the bugler to the con and asked him to play the abandoned ship call. And there is the possibility that this trumpet was the instrument used to sound that call. And by all accounts, the bugler who sounded the call sounded until the very end, until the ship itself sank and was likely lost. So potentially a very important and unique artifact from that site.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, we could do this I could spend all day talking about this stuff. Hey, as we start to kind of wind down here, I am kind of curious. I know that the work that you do, you all take tremendous pride in. It has tremendous historical, if not national security importance at many levels, I'm sure. I'm curious as to, are there ever times when branches of the service, and in particular the same groups of people that the work that you do and the corresponding branches in the other corresponding groups in the other branches, do you guys ever argue or say, that's ours? And they go, no, wait a minute. No, that's really our piece. No, that's mine. That's an Army piece. No, that's really me. Do you ever run into that? And is it kind of a tug of war on an old artifact about something?
Thankfully, no. Okay. Thankfully, we've not run into much of that. At the end of the day, we're all military organizations that are dedicated to the same mission, really. So we've actually had some really wonderful cooperative relationships with other, not only cultural branches of the military, but other federal agencies as well. And we've done projects together, and thankfully we've had wonderful relationships with other branches of the military. So we've enjoyed a really good relationship.
You guys have been cooperative, at least so far.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Well, it is fascinating. Also, one final thing here before we get out of here. Again, you graduated from the University of Kansas. You're from Kansas City. Paul Taylor, who has been very helpful in arranging this with Communication and Outreach Division, is from the Lawrence area as well. So we got quite a Kansas contingent going on here, especially for the Navy. Pretty hard to find that many people probably in the Navy from Kansas in one little spot. But overall, I know we would want to mention opportunities for people to work in or with the Navy.
Absolutely. To be quite honest, it's the Naval Western Heritage Command is a great place to work. Our branch in particular is great. We have wonderful colleagues. We do also offer internship opportunities to upper-level undergrads and graduate students from a variety of fields. We've had students in the past from archaeology backgrounds, from fine arts backgrounds, obviously, engineering backgrounds, chemistry backgrounds. All of it really can find a corresponding project or component within our branch. We do a lot of science, technology, engineering, mathematics work here. And so our internship program is really one of the things we're most proud of in terms of education and outreach. So there are active opportunities to intern not only with our underwater archaeology branch, but with the command in general, with our museum, with our histories branch, with our archives branch. So if there are any KU students interested in coming out to DC to intern, I encourage you to take a look.
Okay, and where would they go to find out information?
To our website, which is navyhistory.mil.
History.navy.mil.
.mil, yeah, like military.
Okay, great. Hey, Kate Morand, again, thank you so much. You're an underwater archaeologist with the Naval History and Heritage Command in D.C. Thank you so much, and good luck in the future.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity.
You bet. We will be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large.